Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting House, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I am your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody. Thank you for stopping by today. I've got two things on my mind. The first is a remarkable community leader from Owensboro, Kentucky, a place where my dad was born and raised and where I was a pastor for some time. She is the Reverend Rhondalyn Randolph. She'll be with me today from her very busy post in that Western Kentucky town as a community leader, an educator, and a pastor. We're going to talk about the voting this week. There was a little controversy. We're going to talk about some courtyard dirt. Some of you will know what that's about. And we're going to talk about Confederate statues. She knows about all of these things. And then after that interview, I'm going to introduce you to the Reverend Dutch Sheets and his crusade for Christian nationalism and his remarkable Watchman decrees. I know that sounds kind of strange to some of you. I have a video that I want you to see, and then I'm going to talk about it as we watch it. And then I have some words about what's going to happen here in the Meeting House. Thank you for stopping by today for our conversation on religion and American life. First, let's get right to the news. From New York City, star basketball player Kyrie Irving has been suspended from the NBA team, the Brooklyn Nets, because he's endorsed a video that is widely considered to be anti-Semitic. There's a real controversy up there, and the team has pushed him to the side. The film is Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. He's a star. He's averaging 26 points and 5 rebounds. He's also a recent convert to Islam. From Charlotte, I have two stories from Charlotte, North Carolina. Some Pentecostal leaders led by Michael Brown of Charlotte, he's a prominent Pentecostal radio host, have opened a website and published a statement disavowing most of the connections to Christian nationalism. I could do a whole story on that. Also in Charlotte, the United Methodist, whose headquarters is in Nashville, Tennessee, have set the date and place of their next general conference. You know, they have postponed the last three because of COVID, but now they're going to hold one April 23rd to May the 3rd, 2024. That's still a year and a half away at the Charlotte Convention Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. From New York City again, the newest vessel in the fleet that transports passengers from the islands in New York Harbor to Lower Manhattan and back is named for the co-founder of the Catholic Worker Movement. Her name is Dorothy Day. Finally, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, really all over Pennsylvania, state lawmaker Doug Mastriano lost his bid for the governorship of Pennsylvania, even though he employed with vigor the rhetoric of this Christian nationalism. That's all the news I've got today. You're in the Meeting House, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'm your host in our studios at WGGS 16 on the outskirts of Greenville, South Carolina. My guest today, the Reverend Rhondalyn Randolph of Owensboro, Kentucky. She's the pastor of the Pleasant Point Baptist Church and president of the local chapter of the NAACP. I want to welcome you for your first time in the Meeting House.
Yes, it is, Dwight, and it's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate our friendship and our partnership in a number of things. I'm fighting off a cold. I think you are too, maybe.
Yes, strep throat.
Well, you've been at the center of three community things that I want to ask you about. The first is the voting in Davis County Owensboro, Kentucky. Tell us what happened last week about the polling places.
Well, what happened last week was there was a press conference to draw attention to the impact that closing certain polling stations would have on the minority community in certain areas in our town that house or that the people with the greatest amounts of poverty live. And the NAACP, along with the Public Life Foundation and the Citizens Committee, we all came together and wanted to bring attention to it because I had been talking about it, and so had other people, but there was not a collective effort where our voices could be heard.
Now, last year or 2 years ago in the presidential election, how many polling places would there have been in the region that we're talking about?
Oh man, we had I think upwards of 20 polling places around town, and this last cycle we have dwindled down to 12, with the majority of those being outside of the city limits. And those two tracks where the majority of disenfranchised people live, it was one of those polling centers that not just those two areas, but a lot of people had taken advantage of, and that was the sports center. And I think our main contention was that the county clerk did not try to find a place comparable in that same general vicinity.
And of course, the main polling place for all of these regions in Owensboro was Third Baptist Church. I'm interested in that because, as you know, I was the pastor there for 6 years, 30 years
Right.
ago, back in the 90s.
Right.
Do you have any sense about what the turnout was for the voting in these areas we're talking about?
Well, actually, the turnout, I think, was about 40%, 45%, which is a little bit better than a usual off year or midterm election, but it was below, 50%. And when I went around and surveyed the different polling centers, actually Third Baptist was not overwhelmed for most of the day. They had a lot of activity, but it was a steady flow, and they had a facility where they could accommodate. But as far as its impact on people making the decision to not vote, we really don't have that yet to compare the numbers from this year to previous years.
When you brought this to the attention of the authorities in your press conference, what response did you get?
Well, I had initially brought it to the attention of our city commissioners because of the impacted areas that it was going to affect. It would have been those under their constituencies that would have been affected. So I took it to the city council to make it a matter of public record back in October. And then after there were no changes, that's when the other citizens groups got together, and we decided to really make a real good push. But along the way, the county clerk had been open. She had been open to communicating, but she was not going to change. She was not going to make any additions. She was not going to make any additional accommodations. And I think that was another thing that really forged us on in pursuing, drawing more attention to this issue.
I'll be interested to follow this story and see if she's more flexible for the next voting round. Now,
well, she's already, not to cut you off, she's already secured the sports center for the next 5 election cycles. So I think
great.
that we did have an impact.
You sure did. And you had an impact also with the monument. For almost 100 years, I understand, there was a Confederate monument on the courthouse lawn. Tell us about this.
Yes, there was a Confederate monument on the Davis County Courthouse lawn, and it had an inscription on the pedestal that read, "To our fallen heroes."
Mm.
And from time to time throughout the years, we would get someone that would write a letter of disagreement to something like this being on public property where everyone's taxes are contributed to the maintenance of that
Hmm.
area. They would voice their concerns, but it really didn't get like a big push. But our state president at the time, Raul Cunningham, he called me because they were doing a push in Louisville and I think Lexington too around the same time. And he asked if I would take up this effort.
Hmm.
And before that, I really didn't think about it like that. But I really, after I got into it, I got to see really what it stood for. And I think the thing that really brought it to the forefront for me was Charlottesville, when the riot happened, and Heather Heyer was killed. There were some religious leaders that were like barricaded in the church there that were scared to come out, and it was all over taking down this Confederate monument. So I said, what is the big thing about Confederate monuments? And I got to looking and researching, and it stands for white supremacy, it
It
stands
does.
for hate, it stands for intimidation, and it has no reason, it has no right to be on public property. So it just kind of took off from there.
And you were the leader there. How long did it take you? And there was a statue and a base. And how
Hmm.
long did it take you to negotiate these things off of the lawn?
Well, it took from 2017.
Wow.
2017 is when we initially started out the cause with a petition, an online petition. And we started out with a silent protest. And it was me and Ursuline sisters and a few people sprinkled here and there. Because believe it or not, people are still scared of retribution, of retaliation, when they voice their concerns or their views on things like this. And when you talk to a lot of older people, they have lived what I haven't.
Hmm.
So the intimidation and the tactics that I use, I mean, I'm oblivious to that.
Hmm.
So I think for me, it worked in my favor because I just went head first in it, where they had more hesitation, you
Hmm.
know. But like I said, we just started out with a handful, and I put tape over my mouth that had the American flag on it, and we held up signs, and that's how we started out initially.
And most of the resistance came from the Daughters of the Confederacy, is this right?
The United Daughters of the Confederacy, who does not even have a viable chapter in our area. And it had to be someone from the Louisville area that came down to voice their opposition to us petitioning the statue to be removed off the courthouse lawn. And they did it to such so much so that they hired an attorney, and come to find out, this attorney took it pro bono, and he came out of Tennessee to represent them. And throughout the legal process of it, before that, they had unanimously, meaning the county commissioners, unanimously voted for it to be removed. And when that unanimous vote came through, and they were actually going to do it, that's when the attorneys showed up.
But you won in the end. Tell us where the statue is now and where is the base now. They've both been moved, right?
Yes, they have both been moved, and it was done, I mean, rather abruptly, because we didn't want to give time, or our judge executive, Al Maddenley, who was very instrumental in ensuring that this was done. And he was going to make sure that it was done before he left his term because he wasn't running anymore. And one night he made a decision that he was going to do it. And he contacted the other county commissioners, and it was removed off of the property early one morning, before anybody woke up.
That's
And
great.
at this point, that it went to storage until the the lawsuit was resolved. And then once the lawsuit was resolved, we agreed that the pedestal or the base would go to the United Daughters of the Confederacy on their property because it fit into proper historical context.
Mm-hmm.
There was an actual Confederate battle, Civil War battle that took place out on 431. So people did die there. So the inscription would be fitting for what happened. And the statue itself is going to be placed in Potter's Field, where there are Confederate soldiers that are buried there in unnamed graves.
Have there been any plans to put anything else in place of that Confederate statue on the courthouse lawn?
I mean, of course, I'm full of suggestions and ideas.
I think it'd
But
be great if there was a community movement to jointly find some local hero, some educator, some crusader, some scientist, and honor them. Don't you think?
I think that would be awesome. But it was my contention that it have community buy-in
Yeah.
from the start. There was a committee that was formed to find locations to put the statue. So it would be fitting to have a committee formed to find different things that we can put in place of the statue on that courthouse lawn.
I might nominate my dad, Tom Moody, who was born in Davis County in 1923 and graduated from Davis County High School in 1940. Well, now there's one more thing going on, and that has to do with the soil at the courthouse lawn. Tell us about this.
Well, I'm pretty sure that people may be familiar with the Equal Justice Initiative. We are trying to be part of the Equal Justice Initiative to commemorate and pay respect to those citizens, Black citizens that lost their lives to senseless lynchings. My theme throughout the process of removing the statue, and even in this, has been peace and reconciliation. Reconciliation cannot take place and peace cannot take place until we begin to live in our truth. That means we have to honor the mistakes of our past by trying to reconcile differences and drawing attention to what we've always tried to sweep under the rug. So the Equal Justice Initiative and what they do fit perfect into what the vision that we had. And I've been working on this since about 2017, 18, somewhere like that. And we, along with other community partners, have came together and we wrote the Equal Justice Initiative Center to be a part of it. But they run into some issues in times past with people that just do the soil sample collection ceremony, and then that's all that they do.
Right.
But what they want to do is foster community conversations on hard topics such as race, such as, lynchings that may have taken place in communities, and do it in a way where it's going to come up with solutions on how to bring communities together. So this is one of the ways that we can begin our process to be a part of that, because this is what we want for our community. We want the peace, we want truth, we want reconciliation, but we also have to acknowledge the wrongs of our past and pay respect to those that had lost their lives to injustice and the injustice of public lynchings.
Is this what we call being woke? This
That's
word
a
now
loaded
is
word.
what?
That's a loaded word.
It is a loaded word.
I think that this has something to do with being a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Because being Christian and shalom peace, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit, that is something that we should walk in. We should walk in love. We should walk in peace, live peaceably amongst our brethren. That is scripture. But there are certain prerequisites before you can do that. One is to walk in love and be the embodiment of love. And the other is to face the truth. Part of facing the truth and part of having your peace is facing the truth and addressing injustices. And if you don't address these things, there will never be peace. because it's a fallacy. You're walking around in an alternative universe, and we know where that gets us with alternative facts.
Rhondalyn, it's great talking with you. Thank you very much for visiting us in the meeting house today. I want to have you back very, very soon. I'm going to keep tabs on all three of these things that you've talked about.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and I miss our prayer time on Tuesday. Hopefully we'll get back to that.
I'm sure we will. Now, just for you and for me, because I'm a Kentucky native too, I'm going to play for our audience now a version of My Old Kentucky Home, which of course rooted in that old plantation culture. And we're trying to be woke to that and to cleanse it and to make it suitable for our broader, more equal community today. Sung by the vocal band from Louisville, Kentucky, Lincoln Bridge.
I love it.
Good. Let's listen to it. Let's watch.
Oh, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. It's summer, the people are gay. They are gay. Well, the corns are ripe and the meadows are in bloom, and the birds make music all day, and they sing ooh. They sing, the young folks roll on the little cabin floor, on where we all happy and bright. They're so bright, bright time, come on knocking at my door. Oh, Kentucky home, we say goodnight. We say goodnight. Weep no more, my lady. Oh, weep no more today. We will sing a song for my old Kentucky home. My old Kentucky home. Far away.
That was the Kentucky vocal band, Lincoln Bridge, singing the Kentucky state song in honor of our guest that we just talked to, the Reverend Rhondalyn Randolph, talking about things down in Owensboro, Kentucky. You are in the meeting house where we have conversations like this. I'm your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody. We're glad that you have joined us today. I want to now turn to from politics to religion, from Kentucky to Georgia. Last July, a gathering sponsored by the Family Research Council featured a man named Dutch Sheets and a document that he has written called the Watchman Decrees. Let me take a minute and set the stage before I show you a video of that event. We've all been talking about Christian nationalism. I've written several articles on it. We did a show on it last week. One network at the center of this political movement is a Pentecostal-based ideology called the New Apostolic Reformation. This is a newer expression of ideas and practices that continue the emphasis of what used to be called the latter rain movement. It's also connected with the Word of Faith movement. Some of you might be familiar with that. All of this includes a conviction that we are nearing the end of the age, that signs and wonders of the first generation of the Christian movement 2,000 years ago have been restored to the Christian church, that prophets and apostles have been appointed and empowered to guide the Christian community. Very little, if any, of this intersects with my own faith and practice, even given my openness to the Pentecostal/charismatic experience itself. I recognize, like we all do, that Pentecostalism is the most energized, most evangelistically successful component of the Christian community worldwide. All around the globe, there are now more than 500 million, that's 500 million, Christian believers who call themselves charismatic or Pentecostal. And the movement has only been in existence for about 100 years, 120 years. This means that they seek what they call the baptism in the Spirit, to practice the speaking in tongues, to exercise words of wisdom and healings and miracles and words of prophecy. In addition to the other practices, of course, that are common to all Christians, like hospitality and generosity and preaching. Within this Pentecostal family is a subset of believers known as the New Apostolic Reformation, as I've mentioned. One of their leaders is a man named Dutch Sheets. He is from Ohio. He was educated in Texas and now lives not far from here on the other side of Columbia in South Carolina. He's recognized as both an apostle and a prophet, not by everybody, but by many people. He has written many books, including this one, Watchman Prayer. I've read this book. I'll have my review up on my website very soon at themeetinghouse.net. He's also the principal author of what are now called the Watchman Decrees. I don't know who it was that sent me a link to this video, but it's a video about an event that happened in Atlanta, Georgia, July the 1st of just this past summer. There was music, there were speakers, there was this ceremony. Dutch Sheets stood on stage with 4 other leaders and led a crowd of several thousand people in the public recitation of this document, these Watchman Decrees, they're called. I think you will find this interesting and perhaps a bit mysterious. Some of you will find it troubling. This video is 4 minutes long. I've divided it into 6 sections. Before each section and after some, I will provide some commentary. So in this first 30 seconds, I want you to notice 2 things. He leads the people to identify themselves as patriots. This is a favorite word of militia-type groups, of people who have a certain ambivalence toward the government in general and the federal government in particular. It was widely used on the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. Second, the document introduces the word watchman. This is taken from the Hebrew Bible, especially Ezekiel 33:7, and quote, "I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Thou shalt hear the word of my mouth and warn them from me." End quote. So let's take a watch at the first 30 seconds of this video.
All right, go ahead. All right, Dutch, lead us.
So we'll read it together, okay? As a patriot of faith, I attest my allegiance first and foremost to the kingdom of God and the Great Commission. Secondly, I agree to be a watchman over our nation concerning its people
and their rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Whereas we, the church.
Well, that was about the first 30 seconds of it. And you notice those words, patriot and watchman. The second segment is very troubling to me, and perhaps will be to you. It consists of several statements that begin with the word whereas. These statements frame an approach to church-state relations that is strange. They assert the authority of faith, church, and religion over the laws, the state, and the government. It introduces the word influencers, which comes perhaps out of pop culture. I attended an event recently in another state and sat beside a young video producer. We were on the set of a film crew. We introduced ourselves and I asked her, "What do you do?" And this is what she said, quote, "I am an influencer," end quote. By which I think she meant I major in social media and seek to use that avenue to influence others in matters of fashion and style, music and film, culture, politics. I don't know whether that meaning of influencer plays a role in these decrees. I'll let you decide. Let's take a listen to these next seconds.
And the pursuit of happiness. Whereas we, the church, are God's governing body on the earth. Whereas we have been given legal power from heaven and now exercise our authority. Whereas we are God's ambassadors and spokespeople over the earth. Whereas through the power of God, we are the world influencers. Whereas because of our covenant with God, we are equipped and delegated.
Well, you can see that what we just watched, states a very strange philosophy of the role that Christians should play everywhere. This third segment that I want to show you is a bit longer. I think it's a full minute. It introduces a series of what they call decrees. Now let me explain what I think I know about this. I actually called a friend of mine who's a Pentecostal pastor and talked about this morning. To decree something is a common practice in Pentecostal religious culture. To decree something is to claim something that needs to happen, and it is to believe that it will happen. For instance, I decree that you will be healed, for instance, or I decree that you will be a preacher. Dutch Sheets is fond of this. He says often, I decree that America will be saved. It actually comes at the very end of this document, this recitation. So this next part, a full minute long, contains the first 5 decrees. Let's take a look and listen and see what you think.
Advance of the enemy. We make our declarations. We decree that America's executive branch of government will honor God and defend the Constitution. We decree that our legislative branch, Congress, will write only laws that are righteous and constitutional. We decree that our judicial system will issue rulings that are biblical and constitutional. We declare that we stand against wokeness, the occult, and every evil attempt against our nation. We declare and we now take back our God-given freedoms according to our Constitution.
So what did you think about that? Did you find some things in there that were a little troubling? You see, the aspiration for government officials to be somewhat religious and to reference God when they make decisions They want righteous laws. But what is that, and who is to judge? Judges, they say, are to rule in biblical ways. Does that mean the book of Leviticus, or the book of Micah, or Matthew, or Corinthians? Evil attacks against our nation, they say, include wokeness and the occult. Well, you know, we've just had a good conversation about wokeness with one of the community leaders in Owensboro, Kentucky. I'm sure that these groups, people who are in occults and people who have embraced wokeness, would be surprised to be lumped together as dangers to our nation. Let's go on to the next section. The phrase 7 mountains is introduced. Let me explain. 7 mountains refers to the popular perception of cultural influence of these 7 parts of our culture: religion, education, government, media, entertainment, business, and family. This is the language of what is called dominionism, derived from the command in Genesis that God commanded the first man and the first woman and their descendants to have dominion over all creation. Notice also the call to permanently control these centers of cultural influence. Let's take a look.
We declare that we take back influence at the local level in our communities. We decree that we take back and permanently control positions of influence and leadership in each of the 7 mountains. We decree that the blood of Jesus covers and protects our nation. It protects and separates us from God. We declare that our nation is energy.
Wow. How does, quote, energy independence rank so high on this chart of moral aspirations? I don't understand that. And as a matter of fact, reading through these decrees leads you to think that unless you're a Christian, you cannot exercise leadership. Unless you're their kind of Christian, you cannot be a leader in any of these fields. But you know, our country is intended to be religiously neutral, that all citizens, regardless of their religious tradition, whether they are believers or no believers, whether they are people of faith or no faith, everybody has a right and a responsibility to be a good citizen, to vote, to participate in the process, to exercise their talents in any of these, quote, mountains of influence. Well, now we read through the last 4 of these decrees. They give the United States, generally called America in this document, a special place in the plan and purposes and protection of God. At the end, number 13 of the decrees, the decree is for the salvation of America. Let's take a listen.
Our nation is energy dependent. We declare that America is strong spiritually, financially, militarily, and technologically. We decree that evil carries no power, authority, or rights in our land nor over our people. We decree that we will operate in unity, going beyond denominational lines in order to accomplish the purposes of God for our nation. And we decree that America shall be saved.
Now in the last section that I want to show you of this video that is from an event in Atlanta, Georgia, July 1, just this past summer. The Watchman decrees directs attention to the Judeo-Christian heritage of our country and uses the phrase, "We will take back our country." It is not clear who has it now, or how they plan to take back our country, or even what it will look like when they take back the country. I'll let you be the judge as you listen and think about this. Let's watch.
Here we go. We know this country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. We know the truth, therefore we stand for truth and will never be deceived. We will never stop fighting. We will never, ever give up or give in. We will take our country back. We will honor the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. America, shall we say? Now give it praise. Wow. I like that. Do you like that?
Well, what do you think about that? Reading this book, Watchman Prayer, was published in 2000, and watching this video, as I have several times, leave me with some impressions. First, the dangers to the country are here and there, identified as liberals and secularists, and also as occultists, strange religions, and even drug cartels. Many of the problems that confront our nation are never mentioned, such as climate change, the needs and rights of minorities, especially immigrants and refugees, health care, including mental health, economic conditions such as poverty, unemployment, and Social Security. These things are never mentioned as concerns. Second, there is almost no attention given to public policy decisions as a way of confronting social problems, and thus no attention given to organizing for action or even using political action such as voting as a tool toward effecting change. Almost all the attention is given to prayer walks, prayer meetings, prayer scheduled. That's what this book is about. It's really unclear to me how this Pentecostal spiritual way of looking at the country, its promises and its problems, is now intertwined with the search for political power and the exercise of political power. Sometimes I think the entire Donald Trump affair has given Christians, in particular Pentecostals even, a taste of power, of political power, of government power, and they are, as it were, intoxicated with its prospects. Finally, there is in the video and in this worldview a troubling mashup of church and state, of politics and religion, of faith in God and faith in the Supreme Court or some other government entity. It's difficult to know where they draw the line. Yes, people of faith and Christian practice need to be engaged in community affairs, in political affairs, in national affairs. We need people of moral courage and spiritual practice in places of responsibility. Chief of police, corporate CEO, state legislature, the Supreme Court, yes, even the White House. But we need these people to work honestly and diligently with others who may have no religious identity, or with those whose religion is very different from our own. We need to find common ground, common cause, common values with those around us. We need to work together to solve problems and make change. This is the way I think God blesses America, that God saves America, not by making everyone a born-again or Pentecostal Christian, but by making everyone open to our neighbors, welcoming the strangers, loving those around us as if each and every person were none other than the Lord Jesus Himself. This is what I think. I'd be glad to hear what you think. You can write me at dwightamoody@gmail.com. I want to take another break, and then I want to come back and wrap up the broadcast today. I want to show you a movie trailer. The The movie is about the religious revival known as the Jesus Movement that began in Southern California in the 1970s. I remember it, spread all over the country. I want you to watch. You'll see some familiar faces, and this may inspire you to go watch it when it comes out next year.
Hey, Square.
I am not a square.
Think we should invite Greg this weekend.
What's this weekend?
These people are hippies, rebels against old-fashioned authority.
I think these kids need help.
What they need is a bath.
You're passing judgment on people you know nothing about. Maybe that's why your church is so empty.
When God walks in here, brings me a hippie, I'll ask him what it's all about, because I do not understand.
This house has a very good vibe. There is an entire generation searching.
Slow down, man, slow down.
Just in all the wrong places. If you want to reach my people, you need to speak to them in a language they understand.
If I bring them in, I'm going to lose my job.
We can only walk through doors open to us. In your church, that's a door that's shut.
You've probably noticed we have some guests here today. I'd like you to meet my new friends. Welcome.
They don't belong here. Half of them aren't even wearing shoes.
They're staining the new shag carpet.
They need our help. If you feel like you're misunderstood and judged, you will find forgiveness and freedom right here.
That was awesome.
Now that door is open any time of day. And if there are some who don't like that, well then that door works both ways.
All right, Pastor, let's begin.
I was almost done with this, but then you did what nobody else would even dare.
This thing that we found, I feel like I belong.
You're gonna need a bigger church.
Our country is a dark and divided place, but now there's hope, and it's spreading.
This is your home, and I want you to tell all your friends about it.
That was 50 years ago in Southern California. I think that's the story of Chuck Smith and what's called Calvary Chapel. There have been partner churches all over the country, actually all over the world, that grew out of this revival. And I remember how it impacted life in Kentucky 50 years ago. But now we're in the meeting house where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'm Dwight A. Moody, your host. I want to thank you for stopping by the Meeting House today. You can visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. You can read book reviews. You can subscribe to my weekly newsletter. You can visit our YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. My initial goal is to have 100 subscribers. That's pretty modest, isn't it? You can subscribe today and help me reach that goal. I want to tell you that I'm looking for musicians to join me here in the Meeting House and play on a regular basis. If you know somebody, if you are somebody, piano, guitar, vocal, maybe a string band, I'm open to anything. If you have ideas or suggested or volunteers, let me know. Write me, dwightamoody@gmail.com. And then I want to warn you about this. I'm planning to introduce very shortly my sidekick, Fenwick. I call him Sir Wick in formal situations. He is my advisor on lots of things connected to the Meeting House, and I need to listen to him. I'm going to introduce you to him here in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned. Come back next week. Write me a note. Send me a check. And have a good day. I'm Dwight Moody in the Meeting House.